Hello, this is the first episode of my podcast series Ideas That Govern Us. Today, I will discuss a topic from international relations policy domain. Although the escalation with Pakistan is over, but it is significant to discuss the role of China in this whole episode and its economic implications. So let's get started. Today is my guest, Professor Srikant Kontapalli, expert in Chinese foreign policy and also East Asian and South Asian foreign policy. So, how would you describe China's strategic and economic interests in Pakistan in context of Operation Sindoor?
Thank you for having me on the podcast. You
Yeah.
said this is the first podcast you have.
Yeah,
Thank you. It's really a privilege to have to speak in this podcast. On the query that you raised on how do the Chinese describe, since 1963, the Chinese have described their relations with Pakistan as an all-weather friend. This is following the construction of a road from Kashgar to Islamabad, which remained an all-weather road, and this is depicted to the bilateral relations. China does not mention such a relationship with any other country other than Pakistan. So this is traced back to 1963, soon after the India-China border conflict in October-November 1962. So it has some implications for the India-China relations. It has also some implication for directly between China and Pakistan. Some commentators mention this as China's Israel
yeah,
in terms of the kind of equipment, military equipment, economic aid, and infrastructure projects that they have built as a kind of close partnership between the two. And it never changed since 1963.
okay,
We have seen the Soviet disintegration.
correct.
We have seen many relations changing in the international system. For example, we have seen during the Trump administration close relations with Russia,
Yeah,
or the rhetoric about close relations with Russia. But in the case of China, Pakistan, we did not see any change in their all-weather friendship. So this indicates that China depicts Pakistan as a close friend. They call ironclad friend, which means then that no sort of bilateral relations or global relations changing. We did not see any change for this relationship. So this is number one in terms of depicting their bilateral relations as all-weather or ironclad relationship. So that is how they depict the bilateral relations. The second is in terms of the Operation Sindoor. We saw when April 22 Pahalgam terror attacks
Yes.
took place.
yes,
3 days later, Foreign Minister of China, Wang Yi, called up his counterpart, Mr. Ishak Dar, and he stated that the ironclad friendship with the Pakistanis, but he also mentioned, interestingly, that Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity and legitimate interests of Pakistan should be respected. He did not mention anything about terrorism. He did not mention anything that China undertook to counter terrorism. Before that, when the Pahalgam terror attacks took place, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson mentioned about the Chinese position that they oppose all forms of terrorism. But there is no active support to India. But there has been an active support to Pakistan,
correct.
as if there is a terrorist incident in Pakistan.
Yes,
And so it was quite interesting that China placed all its bets on Pakistan, even on terror incident. The whole issue of Operation Sindoor is counter-terrorism. In the later stages, of course, it took the form of countering the air bases and others, because Pakistan is using the air bases for attacks on Indian borders. So the Chinese depiction is basically to protect Pakistan, and this becomes quite obvious because of the all-weather friendship. Secondly, just before the Operation Sindoor began, there was a lot of arms transferred to Pakistan from China. In the last 5 decades, they have extended something like $21 billion of arms to Pakistan, which constitutes nearly about 81% of the entire Pakistani inventory, arms inventory. This suggests that China is actually a party to both terrorism as well as to the Pakistani effort to counter India with arms, Chinese made arms. The reason why I'm saying that it is a party to terrorism is in 1979 to 89, when the Soviet Union occupied Afghanistan, China had supported and trained the Mujahideen. The Chinese military intelligence officers trained the Mujahideen, some 245 instructors. They trained the Mujahideen in Xinjiang. And today those, of course, the CIA also had trained. We saw that Osama bin Laden was trained in Langsley, CIA headquarters. But the most crucial thing is that United States had changed its policy during the Bush administration on the civil nuclear agreement. But we did not see any change in China's policy towards Pakistan. Secondly, China was also supporting Pakistan on Pakistan-based terrorists, Masood Azhar, Zakirul Rahman, and others, in the 1267 Committee of the United Nations, which is generally termed as the Al-Qaeda Committee, Sanctions Committee. So we saw that in 2019 and 2020, just 5-6 years ago, that China has been blocking the Indian initiatives to counter terrorists based in Pakistan. So there is an active Chinese support to Pak-based terrorism. And there is no mention about April 22 Pahalgam incident. Although that day, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson mentioned about the China condemning all forms of terrorism, but there is no active support. On the other hand, Indian agencies found that one of the terrorists was using a Huawei phone, which has links to the Peito series of satellites and messaging services that these satellites provided. So there is complicity of China in terrorism in Pakistan, from Pakistan. So this suggests that when we depict China's role in Operation Sindoor related, they have been actively supporting Pakistan on terrorism. And secondly, they have been actively supporting Pakistan on military equipment sales. And also, of course, economic and others.
Correct.
India is not concerned about the economic aspects as long as they don't violate the Indian sovereignty. If China is conducting CPEC projects, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor projects, somewhere in Karachi, somewhere in Islamabad, somewhere in other places, India has no concerns. India's concern is basically that the CPEC should not violate the Indian sovereignty in Kashmir, like in Gilgit-Baltistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. This is the only reservation that India has. But China had invested in these areas, in the Karakoram highway, which passes through the Gilgit-Baltistan, and also the hydroelectricity projects that they have been constructing. So this is the overall situation of Chinese support to Pakistan, which has actually created problems in the South Asian conflict.
What could be the long-term economic fallout for both China and Pakistan if current tensions already it's like it has been stalled by India for at present, but if it escalates further uh, in any situation, then because government has also said that Operation Sindoor is over, not over yet, and so if it escalates further, so what will be the further ramifications of it?
Well, we do not know exactly whether there will be any escalation in this or not, but assuming that there will be some terrorist incidents, because Prime Minister Modi, in his televised speech, he mentioned three basic things. One, we don't distinguish now between state and non-state actors, which was a fiction created by Pakistan. Second, no more nuclear blackmail. And thirdly, there is also the mention about POK as the only issue left to be negotiated. In the light of these, the issue of future conflict may also arise depending on how Pakistan reacts to these proposals. Secondly, Pakistan also has a lot of other terrorist organizations, so they will also be, it needs to be seen how they respond to this. In the light of those factors, it is clear that China's aid to Pakistan has increased substantially. For example, in the CPEC projects, out of $62 billion, they have already invested $52 billion. And $10 more billion is to be invested. We've also seen that the IMF gave a bailout package during the conflict in the Operation Sindoor time. The Pakistani economy also has a lot of debt. It has something like $130 billion debt, total debt. And out of which some 22% is to be given to China. So there is a huge debt to China that Pakistan needs to clear up. And this means that Pakistan is in heavy pressure. In this year alone, Pakistan has to give back something like $22 billion to China. And given the low growth rates of Pakistan, we do not see how Pakistan can repay back these debts to China as well as to the international lenders. The economic growth rates are falling, and there is no scope for any economic growth, higher growth, so that they can repay back the loans. So in this condition, we need to see how China responds. When Sri Lanka melted down some 5 years ago, China went and occupied Hambantota on a 99-year lease. And Sri Lanka was also facing a similar problem of debt repayments to the IMF and other agencies, lending agencies. So if China continues this pattern, we may probably see China occupying territories in Gilgit-Baltistan or in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Because in 1963, China took from Pakistan Kashmiri lands. These include Agil, Shimshal, Ruksam, and Sakshgam. These constitute roughly around 20,000 square kilometers. And today they are occupied by China. This is Kashmiri land. This is not Pakistani land. And 1963 agreement between China and Pakistan did mention that they will relook at these. Article 6 mentions about the relooking in a future, at a future date, about these lands. But China had closed down that chapter. many indications suggest that they have shut down and they want to permanently occupy those areas, Kashmir areas. And in the light of the Pakistani debt, if China further occupies, because there is some news that China deployed some 36,000 security guards in the POK and Gilgit and Baltistan areas for protection of their CPEC projects. Secondly, there is also the problem of the well-off society villages that China is constructing in the Trans-Himalayan region. 628 well-off society villages were constructed so far. And these include across India-China line of actual control. These include in Bhutan-China borders, in Nepal-China borders. And the latest is that they plan to build these well-off society villages in the Pakistan-controlled Kashmir, occupied Kashmir. So if that is so, then we see that China has a lucrative. China first lends into a turbulent region, a lot of loans, and then takes away the land from these, like they took away Hambantota on a 99-year lease. So this is a new pattern of debt diplomacy where China extends loans even if that country does not require. And then if these countries are not able to pay back, because these are very expensive projects at $52 billion in turbulent regions where there is terrorism, etc., it is hard for Pakistan also to repay back. If there is no economic growth rate, you cannot generate revenues out of these infrastructure projects. So as a result, we have a speculation that China may double down on Pakistan, probably make more demands on Pakistan, and possibly take some lands in these areas or other concessions. That because the Chinese debt comes at a very high rate. Commercial, non-commercial loans come at a very high interest rate. Pakistani Senate in its deliberations said it is coming at 5%. Generally, international lenders give you at 0.02%. For example, the Japanese ODA for the Mumbai to Ahmedabad high-speed railway came at 0.002% for 52 years repayment. $10 billion of the investments in the high-speed railway. So 52 years and repayment at a very low interest rate is possible when India is growing at 6% growth rate.
Correct.
In the case of Pakistan, this is not possible. And this is coming at a very high interest rate, 5%. So that is the problem for Pakistan to repay. And Operation Sindoor intensifies the Pakistani economic problems because of the misadventure that Pakistan army made. They lost, it is estimated by some Pakistani Air Force officers that Pakistan lost something like $3.5 billion worth of arms in this Operation Sindoor. And they need to repair all those airfields which are, so it requires a lot of capital to repair those airfields and also the equipment. So this is actually bad news for Pakistan with their heavy dependence on China, and the debt is increasing heavily.
So, next question would be, as China is a permanent member of UN, and also it's a big regional power in our area, in our region basically. So how do you see China's dual role as a regional power and as a permanent member of UN?
I think there is no dual role here. China actually uses the permanent membership in the Security Council and also its all-weather friendship to galvanize all its energies towards the policy towards China, towards Pakistan. So I do not see there is any distinction between the Security Council membership and its all-weather friendship to Pakistan. In fact, China is doubling down with these two. For example, soon after the Pahalgam attacks, the 1267 committee, sanctions committee met. They removed passages of the Resistance Front, which is a terrorist organization which claimed responsibility for the Pahalgam twice, but they declined a third time of any role in the Pahalgam attacks. Maybe for some other considerations, the Pakistan army may have put some restrictions, put some pressure on this resistance front. But what is clear is Li Changqie, the Chinese representative, removed the passage on the resistance front in the 1267 committee. Instead, they brought Baluch Liberation Army and the Majid Brigade into the 1267 Sanctions Committee report. Thereby, China provided an international support to Pakistan on terrorism. Previously, as I was mentioning, in 2019 and 20, they have blockaded the Indian evidence related to Zakirul Rahman and Masood Azhar and other terrorists. So this is the Pakistani help received from China in the Security Council. In 1971, China became member of the United Nations Security Council. And in 1972, China used a veto, first veto by the PRC in the Security Council against Bangladesh membership. When Bangladesh Liberation War took place, the Chinese blockaded the membership by raising the issues of the prisoners of war. As you know, during that time, there were some 80,000, 90,000 prisoners of war who were captured. So, unless until there is progress on the prisoners of war, China was unwilling to admit Bangladesh as a member. And it took nearly 3 years for Bangladesh to struggle and get the membership later on. In 1974, they became a member. So, when Pakistan was broken into Pakistan and Bangladesh, China supported Pakistan in blocking the Bangladesh membership in the General Assembly as a member of the UN. So this is another support that China gave to Pakistan. So I do not see any difference between the Chinese UNSC seat and the regional role that it is playing. It is actually playing a direct support to Pakistan in all its activities.
So, sir, because some questions will be on economic part also. So, how the role of China can be seen as India becoming one of the manufacturing hubs? For example, investments related to Apple through Foxconn, and leaving the China because many of their manufacturing have been shut down there. So, do you think that it is like their role in this escalation, directly or indirectly, and supporting Pakistan, is to hurt the investments, further investments in India of those companies who have already left China and they want to do some manufacturing thing in India?
No, the investments into India, telecom, semiconductor, manufacturing, or other sectors, it is basically based on how India is attractive to the investments. Those China factor is marginal in the overall scheme of the movement of capital from one place to the other, movement of technology from one place to the other. If India is doing good in terms of its infrastructure, in terms of the incentives provided to the manufacturers from abroad, manufacturers will come, investors will come to India. For example, India has the PLI scheme,
Correct.
Production Linked Incentive Scheme. So they promised huge incentives for those who invest in India, especially in semiconductor industry and others, also in telecom. So huge concessions were given to any investor as a part of the PLI scheme. Some $10 billion or $12 billion is given to anyone who is investing manufacturing in India. So investors will take these incentives to invest in India. Many have come. Samsung, for example, had opened up its biggest telecom IT hardware related units in Noida. And Foxconn has come even before all this controversy began. India is now had signed 6 agreements on semiconductor industries with the PowerShot software manufacturing corporation in Taiwan. There is a $10 billion agreement with Tata Electronics to manufacture chips, wafers, which have millions of chips, in Dholera in Gujarat as well as in Assam. There is also the Vedanta, which is trying to have an agreement with TSMC of Taiwan. And Micron from the US also had invested in Gujarat. So these companies came to India not because of China factor, but because India is attractive for them to invest, and there are incentives provided for these. So that is the main reason. Yes, there is a China factor. In Chengzhou, in the middle of China, the Foxconn had invested, and they found a lot of labor unrest. And it no longer became attractive for them to invest in China. Secondly, China itself has become a leader in telecom, in 5G. We have seen Huawei, Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo. All these companies have been doing big investments, and they have been investing heavily. So for them, Apple may not be very attractive. And hence there is a rethinking in this process, and Apple moved out from Chengzhou factory, the Foxconn. Apple contracts Foxconn. Foxconn invests in these places, and then it exports back to Apple. That's the trend we see. So the Foxconn had set up shops in Pune and also Mangalore. And they're doing good. They've invested more than $10 billion. And today, India, the Apple is outsourcing iPhone 16 from the Indian manufacturing centers, almost 100%. So there is a push factor from China that there is some labor unrest. Secondly, they have their own industry coming up. So there is a push factor. So Apple had diversified towards India. China, of course, can do a spoil sport in terms of the Apple company. Apple company moving away from Chengzhou to Foxconn moving away from Chengzhou to, say, Mangalore or Pune, they require some high-tech equipment to be moved away. So China can blockade this. China can put restrictions on some of this machinery which was developed by Foxconn from relocating to Mangalore. It is possible that China can put that. And China is doing that. So China can restrict movement of these equipment, but it cannot restrict completely the Apple shifting to its production to India.
So recently, Trump role has been too much talked about and its administration. And also on 12th of May, US and China had an agreement regarding cutting the tariffs which they had already, like that escalated tariff which they had put on each other. So how do you see that, like Trump and Trump's role in playing with these three countries, India, China, and Pakistan? Because Trump also said that he is interested in doing trades with Pakistan, and as he has cut down the tariff rates with China in an agreement on 12th, and also with India, like. Although everything was going good, but recently he was not happy with Apple's investment in India, and he was saying that they should try to manufacture in US, because otherwise they will put more tariff on the products which will be finally exported to the US.
Well, the Trump factor is denied by the Indian side of having an impact in the understanding. India uses the word understanding, while Pakistan is used the word ceasefire.
Okay.
On what happened on May 10th. The Indian side argument is that Pakistani DGMO first called up the Indian counterpart on May 10th morning. And then in the evening, after all the discussions, there is an understanding. So the Indian government traces this to the military actions that India conducted on Noor Khan, on Sargodha, on various other 11 airfields in Pakistan. The damage for Pakistan is quite substantial in these. As I was mentioning, some $3.5 billion of losses in the strikes by BrahMos and other missile systems. So they were in a panicky. The Pakistani interlocutors who were interviewed by the Western press, The Guardian more specifically, they said that the Pakistani side has been on tenterhooks, and they were worried about the escalation and further losses. And so they became panicky, and they suggested for a ceasefire with India. Now, the American version is that the Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and the NSA, and Vice President J.D. Vance, they have talked to the Indian leaders, and some 30 other leaders also talked to the Indian leaders. And then they put pressure on India to discontinue the strikes on Pakistan. We do not know exactly what happened when, but what is clear is that United States was a party to Pakistan, like China. It is a major non-NATO ally. And secondly, Americans have sold a lot of military equipment to Pakistan, F-16s and C-130 and other equipment. Many of these could not really function well in Operation Sindoor, May 6th to May 10th. And so there is also the disappointment that the Americans felt, like the Chinese felt as well, for the war capabilities, the conflict capabilities. In the light of that, the United States possibly wanted to upgrade its intervention in the Pakistan side. And so possibly this is. But there are also reports that Trump wanted to intervene because of the large-scale destruction that Pakistan may face. Secondly, the nuclear factor. It is reported that when the Sargodha base was stricken, there was the radiation that was coming up, although IAEA denied of any radiation coming in. But other reports indicated that the Kirana Hills exhibited radiation. So there is a certain American concern about the nuclear fallout. some suggested that these nuclear weapons are under the command control of the United States.
Okay.
So there is the overall concern of the US on the nuclear factor. A third factor, some mentioned that Trump is generally mentioning about the de-escalation in Russia-Ukraine conflict,
Okay.
in Gaza conflict, and so the third India-Pakistan conflict. So the speculation is that he wanted a Nobel Peace Prize
Okay.
for bringing in together all of these, and hence the speculation suggested that he had an active role in pushing the vice president and the secretary of state for the mediation efforts. We do not know exactly because these are all not in public domain. We heard that in the newspapers about these mentioned. In the case of India, India denied of any US role, US pressure, and it is the Pakistani DGMO's phone call to his Indian counterpart that led to the ceasefire from a Pakistani perspective. So that is possible. Yes, it is true that Trump had also told Tim Cook, the Apple CEO, that there is a problem in terms of Apple moving to India, and there will be tariffs on the Apple products if these are outsourced from India. But in any case, day before yesterday, the U.S. courts have quashed the U.S. Trump tariffs, and so this doesn't arise at all.
Okay.
The issue of putting, even if supposing the Trump administration prevails over imposing tariffs, it would be pretty hard for the Apple to shift to the United States because the US per capita income is $83,000. Indian per capita income is about $4,000. And if Apple manufactures the iPhone, it manufactures at a rate of 4,000 on an average of labor wage in India. But if it has to manufacture in the United States, they have to pay a minimum $40,000-$50,000, which means the profits in selling iPhone will sharply decline in the US market. Somebody mentioned it comes to about $3,000 per iPhone unit, while in India, if they generate the iPhones, it comes to $1,000. So 3,000 to 1,000, that is the ratio if Apple has to manufacture in the United States. So it is basically the logic of labor wage that would incentivize Apple to shift towards India rather than towards the United States. So Trump's MAGA, Making America Great Again, would be problematic from an Apple perspective because there is huge labor wage in the United States. So it's basically economic sense.
Yeah. So, final question will be like the PM's latest speech, where he was, although he was praising and appreciating the role of security forces, armed forces in the Operation Sindoor and the other operations which were held during that escalation with Pakistan. But now he has asked for the role of common Indian citizens, and he said that that common Indian citizens should be anyone should be cautious about their role while doing business with China. There is lots of products related with Diwali and Ganesh Chaturthi and other festivals which are imported from China. So that was he mentioned while and also he gave example of this. So how do you see that will people agree to this, and if there will be some kind of agreement within the masses for this, so will it impact like China's economy in terms of like the trade which it's doing with India?
So China's trade with India is about $135 billion. out of which nearly $95 billion or so is the Chinese exports to India. And we hardly export to China because of the non-tariff barriers. Chinese come out with some funny rule logic to blockade the Indian products from getting imported into China market. So as a result, in the last 15 years, India lost $1.4 trillion in trade deficits to China. Economists generally argue somebody wants to purchase cheaper products, or if it is not available in the Indian market, they would source it from China. And there is also variety, color, and quality stuff that is available compared to other products in terms of price. And so Indian consumer has been importing those because there is variety and cost effectiveness. So what the Prime Minister is mentioning is that we need to now look at our own production, and we need to focus on Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign and source the consumer and other products from the Indian market. So that is what he is trying to appeal. But behind this is also the concern that China is using, number one, the trade deficits for arming Pakistan with the 1.4 trillion surplus. China today can arm many South Asian countries against India by tapping into the Indian consumer's pocket. It can actually arm the other South Asian countries. Secondly, by these surpluses, China also has a leverage over the Indian market. Sometimes it can reduce some products like rare earth metals, which they are trying to do in the last 1 year to the Indian market, or some high-tech equipment like the Apple equipment from Changzhou. It can also restrict those products. So what the Prime Minister is mentioning is that we are vulnerable if we are dependent heavily on one country. Not necessarily China, but any country which is the dominant exporter to India will have to face the problems. For example, during the COVID-19, we had oxygen concentrators coming from China. It actually costs about 20,000 rupees, that unit. But China increased the price to about 2 lakh rupees. So it made a kill out of the whole sales of the oxygen concentrators. So the solution that India offered when Indian President Pratibha Patil visited China in 2010, she suggested to her Chinese hosts that China should not impose non-tariff barriers. China should open up its market. And this is not a favor that China is doing to India. This is part of the WTO on which China had signed in. So it's not a favor. It is an obligation for China to open up its market. But smartly, what China did was it asked every other market to be opened up, while it did not open up its own market, even for the US, EU, Japan, Korea, ASEAN, or Indian products. So it's a lopsided market economy. No major country recognizes China as a market economy.
Okay.
Market economy would mean based on demand supply. So there is a skewed nature of the economy in China, and it's a lopsided one, and China unilaterally benefits from exploiting the other markets abroad. And so what the Prime Minister is mentioning is here that China needs to open up its market for the Indian products if we have to sustain the trade and other economic relations. President Patil also mentioned that China needs to invest in India, but so far in the last 20-25 years, Chinese total investment in India is $8.2 billion.
Okay.
For an economy of $19 trillion, it had invested $8 billion in India. While in a turbulent region like Pakistan, it had invested $52 billion.
That's so much
You see the
difference.
And the priority that China places. In the case of Pakistan, China is receiving lands of Kashmir. So it is very useful for China. These are all strategic roads, strategic areas. So President Patil at the time suggested China needs to invest in India. This is not a sustainable relationship, trade relationship. And she also suggested that India and China can manufacture some of these in India and we re-export to a third market, to Asia, Africa, South America, or other countries. China did not do any one of these. And in the last 2 decades, they had these $1.4 trillion of surplus.
Okay.
And Indian governments have been weaker because we had coalition governments.
Yes.
Even if there is a stronger government in the US, they were not able to force China to open up. It's only Trump tariffs did some trick. But even in this, the Chinese did not open up their markets. So it's very stubborn in terms of its market-related areas. So what Prime Minister Modi is saying is, apart from these 4 that China needs to implement, which it is not implementing, and it is not a favor that they are doing, if we are trading, they have to extend reciprocity.
Correct.
They have not extended reciprocity, and hence Prime Minister Modi was trying to say that let us reduce our consumption from China. A third reason that he was mentioning this is because of the vulnerabilities. For instance, in many Indian manufacturing companies, Indian port construction facilities, infrastructure facilities, we are importing a lot of Chinese labor. It is estimated that we have about 26,000 Chinese labor prior to the Galwan incident.
Okay.
And most of the visas were not extended. So they were in energy pipelines, they were in port construction, they were in manufacturing centers, road construction. Today we are doing better in road construction and others. So we don't need to import the Chinese technicians for these. For instance, in a port in Kerala, there was a demand for 1,500 Chinese. And it is said that last 2 months, a big company in India forced the Indian government to import these Chinese technicians.
Okay.
So the concern is that you're leaving vulnerabilities by having these people coming here. And they are there and they know the project. And during times of crisis, they may actually create a negative impact on that project. So Prime Minister is cautioning that we need to develop our own skills. And we are good in, we can even take training from Germany, Japan, or other countries. So he was cautioning to the vulnerabilities of dependence on China. Not just China, but any country which has a huge trade with us. Because in the case of US as well, as Trump had mentioned, tariffs was a kind of restriction that he played on India, Pakistan. To what extent that impacted, we do not know, because Pakistan hardly had any trade with US. Indian trade is just about $120 billion with the US. So it's not highly vulnerable to the US trade aspects. In our total 1.1 trillion, 120 is with the United States. So it doesn't really affect our, but he said, tariffs would impact. Of course, India was also concerned about his argument about Kashmir being a subject that can be resolved, because that has, since 1993, no US leader mentioned Kashmir. So Trump mentioning this has really created ruffles in India on this issue. So Prime Minister is basically trying to say that we should reduce our vulnerability. As you know, last 1.5 year, or even during the COVID supply chain disruptions, many countries suffered because of their over dependence on one particular country for trade or investments or high tech equipment. So, this is a basic argument the Prime Minister is making. Let us reduce vulnerabilities and let's focus on our own strength.
Yeah. So thank you so much, sir, for this so much enriching conversation.